So Australian English Institute is a very recent company then?
It is, yes.
Right. So can you tell me more about that and how that happened?
Well, like I said, there was a couple of guys teaching English living in my neighborhood, a couple of Australian guys, all married to Chilean women.
Right.
And we just decided that we would start this kind of side project offering Australian English to people living in Santiago that may be interested in going to Australia or
right.
studying there. And these classes would help them adapt, kind of train their ear to hearing the accent, the Australian typical Australian expressions. So
yeah,
we essentially just did all the legal paperwork to start the company, and that's kind of it, really.
Yeah, I went to your website, and it says there you have one founding partner. So you have a business partner, right?
Yes, that's true. Anthony, right. He's from Melbourne.
Yeah, can you tell me more about this relationship? How did you guys meet, and how long have you been friends?
I've known Anthony for about 3 years, I think,
right.
more or less. And I know him because he lives very close to me.
Okay.
And I used to see him in the park. He has dogs, and I have dogs, so when I walk my dogs.
It was a natural encounter then.
Yeah, we used to see each other in the park, and that's how we met and just continued being friends. And
nice.
Yeah.
That's how you started talking about this project and starting the Australian English Institute.
I just mentioned it to him one afternoon because he was kind of saying that he wanted to work more. He wanted to have more things happening in Santiago, and I just mentioned the idea, and he liked it, and the rest is history, really.
Yeah. So what were some of the difficulties you guys faced at the beginning when you decided to start this language school, like Australian Institute?
Well, I think that we're still... The difficulties are getting students. I mean, people, finding students that actually want to learn Australian English. And I should also mention that we offer English in general. It's not just Australian English.
Right.
The English we can also teach you international English, but obviously we specialize in Australian English. But
exactly. Now
the difficulty we face and still face is always with so many with so many English companies in especially Santiago.
Right.
Trying to actually make a name for yourself is pretty tough.
Yeah, making a name and also getting enough students to your school.
Yeah, and there's a stigma attached to Australian English that it's kind of an ugly, not kind of credible type of English, but it's essentially just like any other English in terms of British English or North American English.
Yeah.
The accent is different and the expressions are different. But
yeah, that's true. But I never heard of the stigma or Australian English being regarded as a nasty language, or I have heard that it is more difficult to pronounce or more difficult to learn maybe, or hard to understand. But I never thought of it as having a stigma on it.
Yeah, I mean I think there is a bit of a notion that it's like the Chilean Spanish. It's
right.
You've probably heard people talking down or talking bad about how Chileans speak Spanish.
Yeah, exactly.
There seems to be some sort of I don't know. I'm not saying everybody thinks like that, but some students have told me that the interpretation of Australian English is not the best. So
right. Okay. Well, never heard about that before. That's quite interesting. I read on your website that, or at least it says there, you provide Australian English to Santiaguinos. Maybe you guys should, make it available to the entire population of Chile, because nowadays through all of this technology and stuff, you can actually teach English through Skype or other platforms, and you can actually reach not only people in Santiago where you have the company, but also all across the country, all across Chile. What do you think about that?
Well, if somebody was to call from a different place, Temuco or Concepcion or wherever outside of Santiago, and wanted to have classes via Skype or something like that, that would be no problem. We could definitely do that if anybody's interested in that. Yeah, sure, that wouldn't be a problem.
That sounds great. So now, can you please tell me a little bit more about the different services that you offer? I understand you offer services to students, tourists, and also professionals.
It's essentially, I suppose, the idea behind the Australian English Institute is for people who are looking to go to Australia, maybe on a work and holiday, or maybe for work, to study, or even for a holiday, and they want to, before they get to Australia, they want to kind of train their hearing to the accent and to familiarize themselves with really common expressions that Australians use, because in Australia, they're just like Chile. There are a lot of kind of colloquial expressions that are only used in Australia. So we want to kind of help people understand what that means and kind of integrate that into their vocabulary before they get to Australia, just so they're not freaked out or really overwhelmed.
So they get used to the accent as well, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, that's essentially the idea behind.
Right. Yeah, because besides like the most typical Australian expressions, there is also an accent thing that they have to deal with, right?
That's true, yeah. And it's not like the North American accent, and it's not like the British accent.
Right.
It's Australian, and the guys that work with me, they obviously have the accent, and that's the idea, that somebody who has class with us hears that and kind of gets used to hearing that, and just to help them out, just so when they get to Australia, because I've heard so many times that people went to Australia for some sort of work and holiday or study, and they got there, and the first person they spoke to, they just didn't understand a word, because they weren't used to the accent. Maybe they had taken classes, but with, I don't know, somebody with a British accent or North American accent, and they weren't used to that really Australian accent.
That's right, I understand. So to sum it up, you guys offer services to students, that is, students who are thinking of traveling to Australia, maybe to do a master's degree program or maybe an undergraduate program, and who are getting prepared to actually understand the Australian language and the most typical expressions.
Could also be somebody going there just on a holiday.
Exactly. People are also tourists, people who are thinking of spending some time in Australia to maybe relax, maybe visit some landmark places, some Australian hotspots, and finally professionals, right? People who are looking to find a job in Australia and make themselves understood by Australians, as well as understanding Australians. Yeah,
and you might have some questions, like general questions about where to go, places to live, the health system. We know a lot about, health system and visas. We don't actually directly organise the visa, but, I have an understanding of that system. We can kind of point you in the right direction. And
right. Yeah, that's a plus as well. Some additional guidance or help that you can provide.
There's a lot of companies today that offer kind of programs for people going to Australia. They help with the visa, with accommodation. They even offer English classes, but I'm sure that they don't offer English classes with a native Australian speaker. And if you're going to Australia,
that's true.
That is exactly what you need.
Yeah. And in addition to English classes for students, tourists, and professionals, I also read on your website that you guys offer translation services as well as cultural tours. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, the translation services could be for a document, that's going to Australia, or it could just be a document that needs to be translated from Spanish to English or vice versa. I mean, that's just a service that because I've been working in translation for a while, that we offer. And the cultural tours, Anthony, he runs that service. Anthony is an architect, or was an architect in Australia, and He's also a painter. He's a very artistic guy.